the scandal that destroyed Ingrid Bergman when America's Saint became Hollywood's greatest sinner. March 15th, 1950. Ingrid Bergman stood on the deck of an ocean liner bound for Europe, watching the Statue of Liberty disappear into the fog. America's most beloved actress was fleeing her homeland in disgrace, her career in ruins, her reputation destroyed. Just 18 months earlier, she had been the most admired woman in America, pure, noble, untouchable. Now she was branded an adulteress, a homewrecker, and a national disgrace. What happened next would either destroy her forever or prove that some things are worth losing everything for God. This is the Ingrid Bergman story that shocked a nation and changed Hollywood forever. Not the saintly nun from the Bells of St. Mary's or the noble heroine of Casablanca. This is about the day America's most beloved actress chose love over reputation, truth over image, and paid a price so devastating it would take 7 years to overcome. Because Ingrid Bergman didn't just have an affair, she shattered the most sacred rule of 1950s morality. She left her husband, abandoned her daughter, and ran away with a married Italian director to have his children. In an era when divorce was scandalous, adultery was unforgivable, and abandoning your child was unthinkable, Ingrid Bergman committed all three sins at once, and America never forgave her. Until, against all odds, she found a way to forgive herself. To understand the magnitude of Ingrid's fall, you need to understand the heights from which she fell. By 1948, Ingrid Bergman wasn't just a movie star. She was America's moral ideal. She had starred in Casablanca, Gaslight, and the Bells of St. Mary's, playing women of unshakable virtue and quiet strength. Her natural beauty, her lack of vanity, her apparent wholesomeness made her the antithesis of the typical Hollywood glamour queen. More importantly, Ingrid's personal life seemed to match her screen image. She was married to Dr. Petter Lindstrom, a respected neurosurgeon. They had a beautiful daughter, Pia, who was 11 years old in 1948. They lived quietly in Beverly Hills, avoiding the Hollywood party scene. Ingrid didn't smoke, rarely drank, and was never photographed in compromising situations. Fan magazines called her the Saint of Hollywood. Religious groups held her up as an example of how movie stars could maintain their moral compass. She received thousands of letters from women thanking her for, proving that success and virtue could coexist. But the real Ingrid Bergman was suffocating under the weight of her own image. The truth was that Ingrid's marriage to Petter had been failing for years. He was a cold, controlling man who treated their marriage like a business arrangement and their daughter like a medical case study. Ingrid felt trapped, lonely, and increasingly desperate for genuine human connection. Her career, while successful, had become predictable. Hollywood kept casting her in the same types of roles: noble sufferers, virtuous wives, women who sacrificed everything for others. Ingrid was a brilliant actress, capable of complex, challenging work, but the studios were terrified of damaging her wholesome image. "I felt like I was dying inside," Ingrid would later say. "Everyone saw me as this perfect woman, but I wasn't perfect. I was human, with human needs and human desires, and I was tired of pretending otherwise." Then Roberto Rossellini entered her life and changed everything. In early 1948, Ingrid saw Rome Open City, an Italian neorealist film by director Rossellini. She was stunned by its raw power, its emotional honesty, its complete rejection of Hollywood artifice. This was the kind of filmmaking she had always dreamed of being part of. On impulse, Ingrid wrote Rossellini a letter. "Dear Mr. Rossellini, I saw your film Open City and enjoyed it very much. If you ever need a Swedish actress who speaks English very well, who has not forgotten her German, who is not very understandable in French, and who in Italian knows only ti amo, I am ready to come and make a film with you. That letter, written in a moment of artistic passion, would destroy her life as she knew it. Roberto Rossellini was everything Petter Lindström was not. Where Petter was cold and methodical, Roberto was passionate and impulsive. Where Petter was reserved and proper, Roberto was emotional and expressive. Where Petter treated Ingrid like a beautiful object to be controlled, Roberto saw her as an artist to be liberated. When Roberto arrived in Hollywood in early 1949 to discuss making a film with Ingrid, the attraction was immediate and overwhelming. This wasn't just physical, though the chemistry between them was undeniable. This was a meeting of minds and souls. Roberto saw in Ingrid the actress she could become if freed from Hollywood's constraints. Ingrid saw in Roberto the life she could have if she had the courage to claim it. But Roberto Rossellini was married with children, and his affair with Ingrid became the worst-kept secret in Hollywood. By the summer of 1949, as they filmed Stromboli on a volcanic island off the coast of Italy, Ingrid and Roberto were desperately in love and completely reckless about hiding it. The Italian press photographed them together constantly. Hollywood gossip columnists were filing reports about their obvious affair. Worse, Ingrid discovered she was pregnant with Roberto's child while still married to Petter, and while Roberto was still married to his wife, Anna Magnani. This wasn't just adultery. This was a scandal that would destroy multiple families and shatter the carefully constructed moral facade that Hollywood had built around its biggest stars. The moment of truth came in December 1949. Ingrid was back in Hollywood, visibly pregnant and unable to hide it any longer. She had to make a choice: end the affair, have an abortion, and return to her safe but suffocating life, or tell the truth and face the consequences. On December 13, 1949, Ingrid called a press conference. Standing before dozens of reporters, her pregnancy clearly visible, she made an announcement that would shock America. She was leaving her husband to marry Roberto Rossellini, and she was expecting his child. The reaction was immediate and devastating. This wasn't just a celebrity scandal. It was seen as a betrayal of everything Ingrid represented. America turned on Ingrid Bergman with a fury that was both shocking and complete. Within hours of her announcement, radio stations were pulling her movies from scheduled broadcasts. Theater owners were canceling screenings of her films. Religious groups were calling for boycotts of anything associated with her name. But the cruelest blow came from the United States Senate. Senator Edwin Johnson of Colorado rose on the Senate floor and delivered a speech that would define how America viewed Ingrid for the next 7 years. When Ingrid Bergman turned her back on her husband and her daughter and fled to the fleshpots of Europe, she forfeited the respect of every decent American. She has become a disgrace to the industry that made her a powerful influence for evil. I regret to say that the powerful impact of her example may be to persuade other wives that they too can abandon their responsibilities. The Senate officially condemned Ingrid Bergman as a powerful influence for evil and urged the motion picture industry to cleanse itself of her presence. But perhaps the most devastating consequence was what happened to her daughter. 11-year-old Pia was left behind with Petter, who used his daughter's pain as a weapon against Ingrid. He changed Pia's name, moved to a different city, and spent years poisoning the child's mind against her mother. He told Pia that her mother was a whore who had abandoned her for another man. Ingrid's sister Ola later revealed. He made that little girl believe that her mother's love for her was a lie, that she had never mattered to Ingrid at all. For Ingrid, losing Pia was worse than losing her career or her reputation. She had sacrificed everything for love, but the price included the child she adored. In exile in Italy, Ingrid discovered that love alone wasn't enough to rebuild a life. Roberto, while passionate and brilliant, was also mercurial and unfaithful. Within 2 years of their marriage, he was having affairs with other actresses. The man Ingrid had sacrificed everything for proved to be no more faithful than any other man. But there was no going back. America had made it clear that Ingrid was no longer welcome. Her films were banned. Her name was poison. Her very presence was considered a contamination of American values. For 7 years, from 1950 to 1957, Ingrid Bergman was effectively erased from American popular culture. The woman who had been one of Hollywood's biggest stars became a cautionary tale about the price of moral failure. But Ingrid refused to be destroyed by America's judgment. During her exile, Ingrid threw herself into her craft with renewed determination. She made films in Italy, France, and England, working with directors who valued her talent over her reputation. She learned new languages, explored different acting styles, and gradually rebuilt her confidence as an artist. More importantly, she began to understand that America's condemnation, while painful, didn't define her worth as a person or as an actress. They wanted me to be ashamed, Ingrid said years later. They wanted me to crawl back and beg forgiveness for being human. But I refused to be ashamed of choosing love over convenience, truth over image. I made mistakes, but I also chose to live authentically for the first time in my life. The moment that would change everything came in 1956. Director Anatol Litvak was casting Anastasia, the story of a woman who may or may not be the lost Russian princess. He believed Ingrid was perfect for the role, but he also knew that casting her would be career suicide. Producer Buddy Adler made the brave decision to hire Ingrid despite the risk. "She's the best actress for the part," he said. "If America isn't ready to forgive her, that's America's loss." When Anastasia was released in 1956, American audiences saw Ingrid Bergman on screen for the first time in 7 years. What they saw was a revelation. This wasn't the wholesome saint of her earlier films. This was a mature, complex woman who brought depth and pain and wisdom to her performance. The years of exile, of suffering, of being condemned and rejected had made Ingrid a better actress. She brought to Anastasia a wounded vulnerability and hard-earned strength that the younger Ingrid could never have achieved. American critics were stunned by the power of her performance. Audiences, many of whom had condemned her just years earlier, found themselves moved by her obvious talent and genuine emotion. On March 27, 1957, Ingrid Bergman won the Academy Award for Best Actress for Anastasia. She wasn't in America to accept the award. She was still too afraid of the reception she might receive. But when presenter Cary Grant announced her name, something extraordinary happened. The audience of Hollywood professionals, many of whom had participated in her exile, rose to their feet in thunderous applause. They applauded for nearly 5 minutes, and many people in the audience were crying. It wasn't just applause for a great performance. It was America beginning to forgive itself for what it had done to Ingrid Bergman. But the real test came when Ingrid finally returned to America in 1958. She was terrified. 7 years earlier, she had fled in disgrace. She had no idea what kind of reception awaited her. When her plane landed at Idlewild Airport in New York, Ingrid was shocked to see hundreds of fans waiting for her. They were cheering, calling her name, holding signs that said, "Welcome home, Ingrid." At her first press conference, a reporter asked the question everyone was thinking: "Do you have any regrets about the choices you made?" Ingrid's answer was both honest and powerful. "I regret the pain I caused my daughter and others who loved me. But I don't regret choosing to live honestly rather than hiding behind a false image." The woman who left America 7 years ago was suffocating under the weight of other people's expectations. The woman who returned is finally comfortable with who she is. Ingrid's comeback was complete, but it came with hard-won wisdom. She never again allowed herself to be trapped by an image that didn't reflect her reality. She played complex, flawed characters who made difficult choices, women who were human rather than saintly. Her personal life also stabilized. She divorced Roberto Rossellini and eventually married Lars Schmidt, a Swedish producer who loved her for who she was rather than what she represented. Most importantly, she gradually rebuilt her relationship with Pia, though it took years to overcome the damage that had been done. When Ingrid died in 1982, Pia was at her bedside, and their relationship had finally healed. Looking back, Ingrid Bergman's scandal seems almost quaint by today's standards. She fell in love with the wrong man, left her husband, and had a child out of wedlock. By 2024 standards, these wouldn't even qualify as scandals. But in 1950, they were seen as moral crimes that justified destroying a woman's life and career. What makes Ingrid's story remarkable isn't just her comeback, it's her refusal to apologize for being human. She never pretended that her choices hadn't hurt people. She acknowledged the pain she'd caused her daughter, her husband, and her fans. But she also refused to pretend that staying in a loveless marriage and suppressing her authentic self would have been the more moral choice. "I was expected to be perfect," she said in her final interview. But perfection is the enemy of truth, and truth is the only foundation for real art or real happiness. America learned to forgive me, but more importantly, I learned to forgive myself. Today, Ingrid Bergman is remembered as one of the greatest actresses of Hollywood's golden age, but her real legacy isn't in her films, it's in her example. She showed that it's possible to survive having your life destroyed by public opinion, to rebuild from nothing, and to emerge stronger and more authentic than before. She proved that talent and determination can overcome scandal, that people can change their minds about someone they've condemned, and that sometimes the greatest courage is simply refusing to be ashamed of your humanity. Ingrid Bergman's story is ultimately about the price of authenticity. She paid an enormous price for choosing to live honestly rather than maintain a false image. She lost her career, her reputation, her homeland, and for a time, her daughter. But she also gained something precious, the right to be herself. In an era when women were expected to sacrifice everything for the appearance of virtue, Ingrid chose to sacrifice the appearance of virtue for the reality of her own life. It nearly destroyed her, but it also freed her to become the artist and the woman she was meant to be. That's a lesson as relevant today as it was in 1950. We all face choices between the images we present to the world and the truth of who we are inside. Ingrid Bergman's story reminds us that while authenticity can be costly, the cost of living a lie is ultimately higher. She lost everything for 7 years, but she gained it all back with interest. And she did it on her own terms, as herself, rather than as the saint everyone had wanted her to be. What do you think? Does Ingrid Bergman's choice to live authentically rather than maintain a false image resonate with your own experience? Share your thoughts about the courage it takes to be yourself when the world expects you to be someone else. If this story moved you, subscribe for more tales of Golden Age stars who prove that real strength comes from surviving your worst moments with dignity intact. Because sometimes the greatest performance is simply being brave enough to be human. Ingrid Bergman showed us that scandal doesn't have to be the end of the story. Sometimes it's just the beginning of becoming who you really are.